Recovery Sort of is a podcast where we discuss recovery and addiction topics from the perspective of people living in long-term recovery. This podcast does not intend to represent the views of any particular group, organization, or fellowship. The views expressed here are solely the opinion of its contributors. Be advised there may be strong language or topics of an adult nature.
All right, here we are again on the podcast. I'm here with Billy. This is Jason. We're here to talk about some kind of recovery-related topics, which you already know if you found us here. So this week we decided we both had some kind of issue happen at our work, and so we thought we would talk about, dealing with spiritual principles or not spiritual principles in a work environment and how that looks and how it affects us and maybe some ways we've found to deal with it. I think Billy told me to go first, so I will relate my story. I'm at a new position that's not entirely a work position right now. I'm in college. This is more of a field placement or an internship if you've never heard field placement before. And so I'm, learning my craft, and I go in weekly to a supervisor, for a supervision meeting, and we go over aspects of the job, things I'm struggling with, areas I have questions about. And so this week I went in and I was like, hey, do you want to talk about this? And my supervisor said, no, I actually have something specific I wanted to talk about. If you could just set your stuff to the side for a minute. And that was like, oh, okay, this might be something serious. What's going on, right? And she said, hey, it's come to my attention. You've been vaping in the bathroom. And I'm like, oh, shit. Like I have. Right. I have. And so in my field placement, I see clients, and generally my preferred thing is to go outside to vape because I don't want to feel guilty and I don't want to have anybody see the vapor in the bathroom. And I just want to be able to freely do it. And I feel like I can do that outside best. But when my clients are back to back and I don't really have time to go outside, and I also have thought I don't really want to go outside and catch one client leaving or another one coming and have them see me vaping. Honestly, I don't like what they may decide that means about me. And so I was taking the liberty and maybe the entitled attitude of I'll just do this in the bathroom, right? I had done it a few times. I didn't particularly notice any vapor lingering in the air. Didn't think it was a big deal. And so I had just continued that practice. So my supervisor brings this up and points it out, and it fucked me up. I was embarrassed, right? Because, and I explained this to her. I'm like, I carry myself really professionally, and this does not look like that really professional self that I carry myself as. I felt an immediate sense of some shame. And it had me pretty close to tears in her office, just to be caught doing something that's not right, because most of the time I live in a manner that I do act accordingly to the rules. And I do know with vaping, that's one area I really don't. I went to Disney World. I vaped in every fucking bathroom I walked in. I don't give a fuck, right? Like, fuck y'all people who don't like it. Look, if I walked into a bathroom full of cigarette smoke, that's kind of repulsive, right? If I walk in and smell cotton candy and donuts, I'm like, that's nice. So I'm like, fuck it. Nobody cares. I'm just going to do it. But it really hurt my feelings to be pointed out about this vaping in the bathroom at work. And so I left there that day feeling pretty rough about it. And one of the things I did come to on the way home, I guess some sort of coping skill. One, I was able to remind myself of all the things I do well at my field placement, right? I do a whole lot of stuff right. I follow a lot of instruction. And so I got to look at the whole picture, not just this one thing that was pointed out that wasn't well. So that was a little relieving. But more relieving was this concept of, I left work that day looking at this conversation about me vaping in the bathroom as a, air quotes, bad thing. Because that's how I like to judge everything. It's good or bad, right? We like to value every circumstance that happens in our lives. And so that's what I did. I said, this is a bad thing. But I'm driving home and I'm like, what action can I take from this moment inspired by this so-called bad thing that will have me one day look back at it and say, damn, that's one of the best days that ever happened to me. Because of that moment, this great thing came out of it. So now that's not a bad moment. That is actually a great moment in the history of my life, right? And this concept really intrigued me. And so I thought about it and I came up with some things. One thing I've been thinking about going back to therapy. So maybe this moment could be the inspiration that actually sends me back to therapy, the driving force that truly makes the decision, hey, I need to make an appointment and go see somebody and talk about some stuff, right? That would be positive. Even more positive, I believe, would be if I use this moment to quit vaping, right? I could look back on this in a year and say, oh shit, that moment didn't feel so good in the moment of it, but it actually inspired me to quit vaping. And now I don't do that anymore. And I haven't for 9 months or something. And that's incredible. That's actually a really good thing that happened in my life. And that's somewhat on my mind. I'm thinking about doing that in the next week or two because there are some other aspects of vaping that do kind of bother me. Just the fact that I don't want to be seen outside by people because I'm wondering what they'll think of me obviously means I don't like what it means about me to do it. But I really got caught up in the concept of, wow, I can look at any bad situation in my life and I can, if I take it and use it to inspire something that makes it a good situation later, that's a pretty incredible perspective to have and a good take on life. Like I can turn any negative into a positive using that theory, right? It's what I do after that situation, not so much what happens in that situation that matters for my life. And I thought that was really weird. So I wanted to talk about it.
Yeah, that's one of those concepts I've tried to apply to my using and my addiction, the active addiction part of my life a lot of times. Like I've used that as a motivational type thing for myself and for other people. Like I, used to do these behaviors. I was this way. I ended up, in jail. I was a criminal. I was a criminal and a thief and a liar and all these things. And, because of the results of those consequences, I made different choices in my life. And now, those things, I don't want to say they are a positive, but I use them as part of a positive example of, to connect with people to say, you can overcome these things too. I've been in this spot. I was able to do some things and make my life different. And now when you look at my life now, it doesn't look anything like that guy. I go out and coach Little League and, have a job and own a home. And, people that meet me in the community or at my kid's school don't see a drug addict, alcoholic criminal.
Right.
They see something different. And so people, trying to get out of addiction, you can use that as a very positive example, that negative experience. I thought of two things while you were talking about that. One of them was humility, and what sort of that principle of humility has become so big for me in my life. It's not just about the being humble part, the taking responsibility and those things. Like that's great too, but like look honestly at how you feel about vaping. I mean, as you mentioned, obviously you have some sort of feeling about it. If you think people are judging you or looking at you a certain way, there's something in you that is telling you you don't like that about yourself, or if there's, to me, if I'm doing something that I have guilt, shame, embarrassment, something about, I should really take a look at it and own it, own it. Say, hey, this is a habit that I have that I'm not proud of, because only from that, we take that and we build on that to change. I think to me in your, story there, like I thought of just what's amazing is our ability, or, I like to think that I would do the same thing, is our ability today to go in and just take ownership of it and be like, yeah, I made a mistake. I'm sorry. Like those things in life are so uncommon. And I mean that outside of addicts, outside of, just people in recovery, like just in life in general, like in dealing with people at work all the time, like people taking ownership of mistakes and just saying, hey, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Most of the time, at least it feels like most of the time at my job, people want to point fingers and blame and make excuses. Well, this person said, or that person told me, or someone else said, or these guys were doing it. You hear all that stuff. And it's so rare to just hear someone go, yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. I made a mistake. I won't do it again. And then have the integrity to follow through on that and not turn around and do it again, not just say it because it sounds good and it's going to get you out of the jam, but to actually follow through with some integrity and be like, yeah, I'm not going to do that anymore. And I think of me and addiction, like I remember being a person that always thought, that the rules were stupid. Like I've always and I still think drug laws are stupid and drug prohibition is stupid for different reasons. But I always thought there really isn't all this danger in smoking pot. Why do they get to make this rule that makes it illegal to smoke pot? I could smoke pot and I'm not hurting anybody and I'm not doing anything wrong. And what I failed to realize is if I don't make the rules, I can go against them, but I have to suffer the consequences of going against them. Yes. So this is your consequence for ignoring a rule. Yes. And, it's, again, for me in recovery, it's knowing like, hey, I make mistakes. I screw things up all the time. And the best thing I can do in most of those situations is really just own it, really just take responsibility, sit with it. Like, hey, this doesn't feel good. Maybe I don't want to do this again because it doesn't feel good. Let me sit and really feel this instead of try to rationalize and justify our way out of it. Yeah, it's great that you can take it and turn it into a positive thing. But sit and feel that shame for a minute because you did ignore a rule. You did do something like that and ignore what they asked you to do.
And you make a couple of good points in there. One, thank God for the integrity today, because before, if you'd have caught me, it was like, you don't have me on camera. I didn't do that shit. Right? Like never. I have all kind of excuses.
Can you prove it?
Yeah. I was actually sitting on the toilet and the vape went off in my pocket, and that's why the smoke was there. Like it wasn't because I actually hit it. And another one you bring up, a difficult thing for me is doing things that I know maybe the majority of society doesn't agree with, and being okay with that because I believe it's okay. Like I generally don't think there's anything wrong with vaping. Maybe it's not what I want to do, and maybe vaping's not the best example of this, but there are things that I'm just not in agreement with the majority of society with, and it's still difficult for me to act on it and know I'm going to be judged for it. So that I feel like I get the point you're making, that if I'm worried about what people think of it, maybe I shouldn't do it. But I think there's also a line of things that I like to live in. I still am concerned about how people view me, though, over it.
Yeah. And so two things first about vaping and then something along those similar lines. So I am not a person, I don't vape. My wife does. And I am not sold that it's completely harmless and safe and none of it matters.
And
not only that, but even like the secondhand vaping stuff. I mean, and I don't know, I'm not overly paranoid about it, but I don't want to walk into a bathroom full of vaping cloud of whatever freaking chemicals that are in that shit that make it smell like cotton candy. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what the fuck that is. And I'm not agreeing to put that in my body. So I shouldn't have to deal with that.
That's fair.
The second thing was similar at my job this week. A guy brought up to me that I tend to curse a lot at work and that I tend to take the Lord's name in vain. And that to him was offensive. He's a religious guy and he finds it a little bit offensive that I say, God damn it, a lot. And he wasn't bringing it up in like a overly like attacking way. I get along with him really well. And he actually felt comfortable enough to kind of say it to me in just a conversation. That's nice. And I didn't take it like offensively. Like I just listened to him. And of course I don't necessarily agree with his viewpoints.
Right.
But at the end of the day, you know, once I got past the initial like defensiveness, and I didn't get defensive with him, but immediately in my head, I want to be defensive and I want to dismiss everything that he just said by saying, well, I don't agree with your God, and I don't agree with your rules that your God set for you. That's your stuff. I shouldn't have to live my life according to that. And that's how I felt. What I've learned in recovery is don't always say what you feel right away in the moment. Just sit with it. So I kind of said, yeah, I hear you. I get it. You know, I'll try, whatever. And I said, whatever. I said, yeah, I get stressed and I tend to curse a lot and I don't, because then they made another comment. And this one I did take a little bit offensive and I did kind of make a snarky comment back. But he said, and he's like, I wonder if you like talk like that at home around your children. And I thought, oh, so what if I do? And I said, well, I just said I'll match my kids up against anybody else's kids anytime. My kids are great kids. They're caring and compassionate children. Everyone that meets our kids, give us compliments on what good kids they are. I don't believe exposing them to a little bit of cussing is what makes your kids good or bad. I don't think if my kid says, God damn it, that makes them a bad kid. Your kid cannot say, God damn it, and then go push a kid off the swing set. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like I judge my kids in a different standards than that. And I'm okay with my kids. And if they curse a little bit, I don't really care because I don't care for myself. Anyway, but sitting with all that, so I went home and I kind of thought about it for a little bit. And I thought the truth is, back to that thing was I don't know that I care so much about how other people see me, but I care about how my actions affect other people around me. And if my cussing or saying, God damn it, around him makes him uncomfortable or uneasy, is it really that hard for me to try to stop? Is it really that kind of big of a deal for me to just be courteous to him in that way? And I don't have to go in and tell him. Well, I kind of did. We made a little bit of a joke of it the next day. So I went in and put one of those cuss jars on my desk and I lined up like 6 quarters, because I knew it was going to happen in the day. And I said, here you go. I'll keep this cuss jar here now and try to keep me from cussing as like a joke. But it was meant, I did that for 2 reasons. One, to make a little bit of light of the whole situation, because I don't want him to feel, I like the guy, we get along great. Right. But 2, to show him like I did hear what he said and that what he said mattered and that, I would just try, I would make an effort, no promises. I'm going to make an effort. So at least today I'm making an effort to try to live by someone else's rules that I don't even agree with, but just because it makes them a little more comfortable.
Funnily enough, I have a teacher that tried to work on not cussing as much. And I guess apparently she used to say, for the love of God all the time. And so every time she messes something up in class or it doesn't go right, she says, for the love of Billy, right? Which is hilarious because you're Billy. But it's striking to hear something different, right? It sounds very weird when she says it, even though we've gotten used to it now in class. But I guess replacing a word, I'm with you. It's just hard to be judged by something I don't believe in, right? It's hard. Like, I can't live up to everybody's standards of doing the right thing. I'm going to end up offending some people. But I do think it's awesome that, in general, I think both of us do care about not offending people. We don't try to on purpose. And really, one of the things you pointed out, that he was comfortable enough to come talk to you about it, really says something about your character as well. Because it's easy to realize people in my life who I would approach with, something that might possibly be annoying me. And then there's also people who I'm like, I'm not going to fucking waste my time. I know who they are. They're not going to be receptive to that.
And yeah, so what I initially, talked about living our life by other people's rules. And I think the fine line difference there is, so I don't feel guilty about cussing because it offends him.
Right.
And I am probably not going to stop saying it in general. Like, I'm not going to try to live my overall life. I mean, I'm always subject to adjusting behaviors based on how it affects people around me. But like, I know it doesn't offend my wife. I don't think it offends you. I don't think it offends most of the people that I hang around. So it's probably not a behavior that I'm going to be like, oh my, I need to look. I almost said it there. I almost said, oh my God. And I'm already changing my behavior.
I'm highly fucking offended, Billy.
So I guess the difference is I don't feel guilty about doing that. It's not a behavior that I go, oh man, I have to change the whole way I'm living. It's like I care about the way my actions affect people around me.
Right.
And it affects him in whatever negative way. And that is important to me. It's I think of that, 12th step kind of thing. Like, I want to practice these principles in all my affairs. Well, I want to be a loving, caring, and compassionate person in my life. So I try to do that in all areas where I can. I'm definitely going to fall short of his religious God's rules at work. That's going to happen. I'm sure it's going to happen. And I'm not going to feel guilty about it when it happens. I'm just going to try to do what little things I can to maybe make him a little more comfortable or make the environment a little more, easier. And I don't think it's that big of a deal. Recently I had a similar sort of conversation with my wife and with some people at work, which is why I was talking to my wife about it. So people at my job tend to take this persona with customers. We do a lot of customer service, customer relations. And it's always this attitude of like, well, I'm nice to the people that are nice to me, and I'm rude to the people that are rude to me. And I try to get across to them a principle that I learned in recovery is that I try to be nice to everyone, no matter how they treat me. I want to live by the morals and values that are important to me because of who I am, not because of how other people treat me. And if someone on the phone is upset and yelling and screaming, I don't feel better myself personally by yelling and screaming back at them. I don't feel better by getting into a big argument over whatever, someone's bill or what they were charged or whatever. I don't feel better by winning that argument and being right. When I go home at night, and this is just me, I go home at night, I lay down at bed and I think about it. And I think, man, how could I have done this better? How could I have handled that in a way that brought them some peace, that made them feel, appreciated, like their concerns were addressed in a, healthy manner. And most people don't live that way. Most people are like, well, you're rude to me, so I can be rude back to you. You ignore me, so I can ignore you. And I think in recovery, I've learned that that's not the person I want to be. I want to be someone who's kind to the rudest person.
Right. No, and you're touching on something that I actually find hugely important too. I feel like people live the golden rule in reverse. Instead of treat others the way you want to be treated, I hear it as I'll treat them how they treat me, because that's obviously their application of the golden rule, right? And it just seems so ass backwards, right? And I try to teach my kids this. So look, I'm not a Christian. I don't claim to be. I don't claim to believe in the Bible, but I love a lot of the different Bible verses about Jesus in general. I don't know why. They're touching stories to me that I talk about frequently for whatever reason. One of my favorites that I try to teach my kids about all the time, because they're 14 now and there's gangs of friends and they hate each other one day and love each other the next. And I'm like, listen, you're not going to understand this in Jesus terms, but he said even the tax collectors are nice to their friends, right? And the point was the tax collectors were supposedly mean, evil people that, were taking your money and didn't care about you. And he's like, look, even these terrible people, even these murderers and rapists basically are nice to their friends, right? They're just murdering and raping other people that they don't like, right? Being nice to your friends is no big fucking accomplishment. Right? Being nice to people who are nice to you or do something for you is no huge accomplishment to brag about. Everybody is. What about being nice to people that aren't nice to you, right? That's really saying something about your character. And I try to show them the importance of that, because I'm in agreement with you. Like, it doesn't fucking mean anything that I'm nice to somebody who's giving me money to be nice to them, right? It means something when I'm still nice to somebody who's taking money from me, when I'm still nice to somebody who's treating me badly. And that doesn't mean I don't need to have healthy boundaries and remove myself from situations if they're not healthy for me, right? I'm not saying that, but I should always try to live my morals and values of treating people good, not just to those who are good to me. That doesn't really take a lot of effort, right? I want to live a life that might take a little more effort, but means more to me.
Right. And to me, that is the definition of integrity. I live the values that I believe in to the best of my ability, in spite of the circumstance, in spite of the situation.
Right.
And it's not easy. It's difficult. I don't like to yell at my children. I don't like to raise my voice and get into arguments with them. I do it, but that's not the person that I want to be. And a lot of times just taking ownership of that and recognizing, like, I acted this way. I don't like the way that makes me feel later, means maybe I need to look at that and change it a little bit.
Right.
Maybe there's something I need to change about myself. That awakening of my spirit, that awakening of my conscience that happened in recovery, allows me to be willing to do that. I didn't have that when I was using. It was like, well, I'm just going to do whatever I got to do to get what I need to get, and I'll justify or rationalize it later,
Right.
just so that I can keep getting what I need and doing what I do. And, recovery's taught me that that's the kind of stuff that keeps me awake at night. That's the kind of reasons that I feel guilt and shame and embarrassment and remorse. And living the other way, like living with integrity and living by principles and values that I think are important, is what gives me personal pride, or, gives me, what do they call that? I can't think of the name, but it makes me feel good about the person that I am today.
Right.
And, my values are always sort of, I don't say up for revision. Like, I'm always willing to look at them and willing to see if they need tweaked or adjusted based on situations and circumstances in life. And certain things have ebbed and flowed and changed. But certain ones are always there. I always want to strive to be honest. I always want to strive to be kind and courteous and compassionate towards other people.
Right.
I always want to have, empathy and, just be what I consider a good, morally good person.
Yeah, this ties in, treating people who aren't nice to you as well, treating them well, I think ties in a lot to just the concept of what am I doing when nobody's looking, right? Like, yeah, it's easy to do the right thing in front of an audience, but what am I doing when nobody's looking? And like this week, I could obviously say I'm vaping in the bathroom when nobody's looking, right? But that's not all I'm doing. I'm also, like, a lot of times when nobody's watching, I'm doing the right thing just because it's right for me. It's not about who sees it, who knows about it. It's just what makes me, like you said, sleep well at night. It allows me to lay down and not run through all the things I did wrong or feel guilty.
And then the flip side of that is there's no reason to beat yourself up about it or make yourself feel horrible or anything else. It's like, hey, man, I did this. It was sort of whatever. However you choose to look at it. I'm going to throw some words out there. I don't mean to place my judgments on you, but, I don't mean to be, careless or disrespectful or, whatever you feel about that. But, recognizing that I made a mistake, I'm going to take responsibility for it, and then having the actions that go along with that decision. Like, that's why I think I can live guilt-free today, because I don't just do things, make excuses, and move on and keep doing them. It's I hear when people are telling me that I've done something wrong. I hear when people say that I've caused some kind of harm, and I'm willing to own it and say, yeah, you know what? Maybe you're right. Maybe there's some things I can do differently.
Yeah, and not to take this in the direction of vaping, but I have never, ever once thought that vaping was providing me with a good source of vitamin A and vitamin D for my daily use. It was more the fact that I smoked for 21 years, and vaping gave me the freedom to put cigarettes down. Now, look, my old sponsor will tell you that vaping is Suboxone for cigarettes, and I can't argue that.
I was going to yell harm reduction. Harm reduction.
Right. I do think there's less chemicals in vaping, so I'm hoping that it's way better than cigarettes for me. I don't really know that by any means. I'm just kind of hoping. Some of the science seems to point that direction, that it's better than smoking, and so I like that idea. But it's been 4.5 years of doing it. Maybe it would be nice to not have it, right? And so it's something I do want to look at, and I'm interested in considering. And if this can be the thing that inspires it, then awesome.
Yeah, and I'll say, like with my wife, I am 10 times happier that she vapes than that she smokes cigarettes. She smoked for a long time and was on and off trying to quit and really struggled, and she finally quit. It's been several years, and she's vaped, and I am happier about that than
Right.
anything. I would love her to stop just for the financial reasons and things, but I'll take it as a win.
Yeah, definitely. All right, and I guess that's all we got about that portion of it. We'll take a little break here for some advertising that we finally have, and then we'll come back with some more.
This episode has been brought to you by Voices of Hope, Inc., a nonprofit grassroots recovery community organization located in Maryland. Voices of Hope is made up of people in recovery, family members, and allies. Together, members strive to protect the dignity and respect of those that use drugs and those in recovery by advocating for treatment, support resources, and mentoring. Please visit us at www.voicesofhopececilmd.org and consider donating to our cause. So, the issue I would like to talk about I had at work this week was more of a personal, what I would call one of those kind of moral dilemmas that I struggle with. And we had a person at our job that, for different reasons wasn't a good fit for the company. They had a very negative attitude towards customers, towards the other employees who they were supervisors of. There are things that we had talked to them about several times. We've sat down with the person, my bosses and I and her supervisors and had sat down and kind of said, hey, these are some issues we need you to address. We need you to look at them. We don't want to hear them. We don't want to see them. And they continued, and just, earlier this week, again, it was like a comment about someone she supervises. She actually sent a text message to her boss, who was, the next level up, and told him that this guy is making my life difficult, so I am going to make his life a living hell. And, if that's the attitude you have about the people that are working under you, like, you should not be supervising people, to me, in that way. Like, the attitude as a company overall, we're small, family-owned business. It's not some huge corporation thing. It's, 20 people, however many people. And, it's try to create like a family atmosphere. We're all working together. We don't have really specific titles. There's not, a bunch of overly descriptive job titles. It's sort of, we all pitch in to help each other, to do what we can to provide the best services. And she wasn't fitting into that. So we had to let her go. And the difficulty was, I had went to my boss a week or so ago and sat down with him one-on-one and said, hey, look, here's what's going on with this person with a different employee. She had different issues with a different guy that she was supervising who had made similar claims, but we didn't have the in-text writing, I'm going to make his life hell. But he had made these claims that she does these things to me on purpose. She does these things that, cause me difficulty in my day. And if I'm going to have to probably quit, I'm going to have to find another job. And this is a person that had been with the company for 20 years.
Wow.
So I went to my boss and I said, for those reasons, plus some other reasons, I think we should let her go. And he said, no, I want to give her one more chance. Maybe we'll take down some things that she's doing. We'll sit down and talk to her one more time. We'll give her one more opportunity. So I said, okay. I'd been compiling my list. The other supervisor, who I'll say is like kind of parallel to me in a different facet of the company, he's the one that she sent the text to. Him and I started talking, and both of us felt like one more, how many one more chances is one more chance? Right. And so we had to, in essence, I'm making this a long version of, we had to go in and tell my boss.
Is never enough.
Yeah. And so we had to go into the boss of the company and say, hey, look, we don't think one more chance is good. We think she needs to go. That's really difficult, because I'm a person that fully accepts responsibility for this person is going to lose their ability, not their ability. They can go out and get another job, but they have to go now and find a new job. They're going to be unemployed.
Christmas is coming.
It's going to be, really a negative, experience for them.
Right.
And, that sense of feeling directly responsible for that in a way, was difficult, and I've wrestled with it for a while. I guess I struggled to go in the first time and tell him I didn't really think she should be there. So then to be in this position again, and then so I was there when the conversation happened with her about letting her go, and she cried, and this is the best job I've ever had, and those kind of things. And it was morally really difficult. It's like you're trying to do your job to the best that you can, to look out for the good of the company as a whole, to look out for the good of everyone else around, and yet you're still directly responsible for causing this, in essence, I'm going to use the word harm to someone else's life.
Right.
And that was just really challenging morally.
No, I can absolutely see why that would be challenging. And I noticed you kind of ignored my Christmas comment, but I didn't know if that was you didn't like that idea or not. But it kind of brings up an idea for me, maybe a little off the topic of what you're saying. But if you do feel you need to let someone go, is there a better time to do that? Like, would it be better to let someone go in January? After the holidays? I know Christmas is a large expense for a lot of people. Not everybody, because not everybody believes in Christmas or that festive holiday season of some sort. But it is a large expense for a lot of people, especially with children. And even more than that, I don't even know that it matters. I think most people live in a credit and debt world, so they're probably in debt in January as much as they are in November, right? It might not even make a difference, but I was just curious, do you think that makes a difference at all?
To me personally, no, I don't think it makes a difference at all. And that's what I was going to kind of ask you a question of, like, do you feel like your employer is responsible for the quality of your Christmas or your holidays or maybe birthdays or your kid's birthday?
Right.
No, not at all.
We can't fire him in January. It's Martin Luther King Day. We can't fire him in February. It's President's Day sales, right? No, I got you. No, I don't necessarily think that they're responsible. I do think, like, say this is a company I've been at for 5 years, and they feel like they might need to let me go for whatever reason, whether it's something I'm doing, the position's just coming to its lack of usefulness anymore. I do think it might be nicer after the holiday season. For the holiday season's sake, like, I can feel like I could enjoy the holiday season a little more, feeling secure at my job. But then, I mean, really, once you do it in January, I'm going to be like depressed at least until spring hits anyway. So
yeah, it's weird.
It's better.
I try as best I can. It's a little bit of a blurry line. I try to really separate out my, job life from my home life. I used to mix those up a lot, for lots of reasons. It all used to be one big blurry line, and it caused issues with my wife at home when I would bring issues from work home to her. And then I just want to talk to her about all my work issues and not issues with our family or with us. And then on the flip side, I am personally, friends with my boss, the owner of the company. We are good personal friends outside of work.
Right.
So in order to try to maintain the most professional atmosphere I can, I think both of us try to maintain a different line there. I think it keeps it easier. It's like I say, we're still friends. We still get along and joke and laugh with each other, and we have a lot in common. So, I try to look at work to me like almost like a contractual or a business obligation, like I have with a bank, or like my mortgage holder. Like my mortgage holder owes me nothing other than to make sure that if I make my payment on time, I stay in my house when I'm supposed to, and they pay the things that they're supposed to pay, whatever. That they can't come kick me out of my house because I've paid them when I'm supposed to pay them. Like that's the agreement we have. So that's what I get. And I feel like my employer is the same way. I agree to come in and give you X amount of time for X amount of work. And because I tend to be a person of integrity, I want to uphold my end of that bargain to the best of my ability. And I expect to get my paycheck at the end of each week for the amount of agreed upon money. And short of that, they don't personally owe me anything. If they want to give me something, great. But to have an expectation on that, I don't feel like it's fair to your employer.
Can I bring up something about you personally, maybe?
Sure. Oh, yeah, I don't care.
Okay, yeah, I'm not trying to call you out or anything whatsoever like that. I think you had explained to me that when you came back from, touring the U.S. and your awesome experience there, that your position had been filled but your boss kind of took you back on. Not that you weren't going to be a useful employee. He was already aware of that, but it felt like the way you described it, it was kind of somewhat of a personal favor in a way. And I feel like your lines of profession might be a little more blurred than a lot of people's. I do agree. A business relationship is very much a contract of you perform this duty and we pay you for that. I just wonder if that, I don't know, maybe I heard that wrong when we were talking about that before.
Yeah, so I would say the answer to your question is no, I don't think he did it as a personal favor.
Okay.
Like, it wasn't a personal favor. It was, we are friends, but I definitely believe, and maybe this sounds arrogant, but I definitely believe I bring a lot to the table, and he knows what my value is for working for him and his company. And I kind of actually, when I talked to him about this, because we had a couple conversations about this before it happened, what I didn't want to do is go not talk to him first, take a job and go work for someone else, and then him to be like upset of like, why didn't you come talk to me about a job? Like,
Right.
Why would you not come back here and work? Was it something I did? Did you not like working for me or something
Right.
like that? And again, I don't feel like I'm not going to say I was doing him any personal favor in that. I greatly respect him. And if anything else, I will say this. So I got my job early in recovery. I feel like he took a chance on me because I had a criminal record and I had some things and I had been clean a little over a year. But I had some stuff in my criminal history that could make me unemployable to a lot of places. And he took a risk, took a chance, was willing to take that risk. And so I have always looked at that, as sort of a personal, I owe him personally,
Right.
For taking that risk. But I've been there 19 years now. And so I feel like I've paid that back. I've given a lot. I take a lot of personal responsibility for my job. I will say that. I've been with the company a long time. So I try to treat it as if it were my own.
Right. No, and I wasn't trying to attack your skill set or your professional ability. I definitely think, I'm sure you showed him over time how worth it you were to have on board. I guess I felt like when you described it to me before, it was he had already filled your position with some other people. And so maybe the money wasn't necessarily there like, oh yeah, definitely we need him to fill this position. It was more of a, oh shit, he's back in town. We got to bring him back on board. We'll figure out something for him. Right. It wasn't so much we're hiring you back for what you used to do. It's like, you know what? I really want him here. We're going to find work for a position for him instead of so much, we need this position filled. We'll bring him in for it.
Right.
So I don't know. I just didn't know if that changed. I feel like that changes the personal professional dynamics slightly. I don't know if it really does.
I think it might, but I don't perceive it that, I kind of look at it as the, if for whatever reason, I'll use a football analogy, if the Ravens tomorrow decided, Lamar Jackson isn't the direction we want to go, we're going to cut him loose. And some other team went out and went, we don't really need a quarterback, but fuck it, we're going to hire him because goddamn, he's good. Right? And we don't want him to go away. Here's the opportunity to grab him. We're going to grab him and we're going to use, pay him and stick him on the bench, and we'll figure out what we want to do with him at whatever time, but we're not just going to let him get away.
Right.
Like I say, that sounds awful arrogant of me to say, to put myself in that situation, but that's kind of how I looked at it. Was like, I feel like I'm a good employee. I show up. I don't miss a lot of time. I put a lot into my job. I take a lot of pride. All these are recovery skills, by the way, things I learned in here of, in meetings and through recovery of how to be a good employee, I think I bring those to the table.
Just don't be surprised next week when I introduce the podcast as Jason and Lamar Jackson.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's even more arrogant of me to compare myself to, as some would say, the best quarterback in the game at this moment, I'm the best employee in the world at this moment. Yeah, that's, I didn't mean that. Funny. That was just a comparison because I'm a big Ravens fan, so I'm really familiar with.
I totally understood. That was hilarious.
Yeah.
I guess more back to the topic of having to be a part of letting someone go. I can't imagine that's a difficult thing to do any time of year. I point out that it's Christmas. Any time of year, this is somebody who has been financially, helped by this institution. They're counting on it. They're relying on it. They've, accrued bills and debt based on the fact that they can pay it back because of this position. And whether through their own doing or not of, ability or attitude on the job, nobody wants to hurt people, right? Nobody, well, I don't want to say nobody. People like you and I are not intent on hurting anyone. And so I do think it's hard to do the right thing sometimes. If they're not a good fit for the company, you can't keep them just because you don't want to hurt them, right? I don't know. I think that brings up a good question of, and maybe a good statement. Somebody I heard somewhere along the way, and I've held on to it, said, the right thing is often the harder thing to do in any given situation. And I tend to believe that. I don't know that I've thought fully through it, where there's, maybe there's an exception to that rule like there is to all rules, but it does seem like the right thing to do is frequently more difficult, right? The right thing to do when I'm sitting at home is probably to do the dishes, and that's more difficult than sitting on my ass watching football. The right thing to do in the situation you were just in was to, live with those tough feelings, but not have an employee at your job that's spreading negativity.
Yeah, and I really tried to make sure, and I really look at, the motivations behind letting them go. What are the reasons? Are they personal reasons? Is it because I don't like them personally? Are they because of things like that? Right. Or are they really like legitimate, like, yeah, this is bad for everyone? And I felt like in this case, it wasn't, which is why I don't feel guilty about it. Like, it wasn't personal decisions. There was no personality in my decision making on the thing. It was, it was actively causing harm to other people at the business and customers and, our business. It was not just, well, she, doesn't do this right or that right. It was actively causing damage. And
this wasn't the first time, the way you described it. This was, a frequent thing. You had a very positive exhibit A to, show to the court, I guess. The statement I just made kind of made me think here for a second. I was going to ask people for instances where the right thing was not the harder thing. And then it occurred to me that maybe for people like us, or maybe people in general, I'm not sure. I can't think like earthlings, but maybe the harder thing is only harder because it's the right thing, right? So I thought of this situation. Shout out to my persons with gambling addiction on Twitter, because there's quite a fucking few gambling addicts apparently. I had no idea. But someone could easily say the easier thing to do on a Monday morning is to not walk down to the bookie and place a bet, right? The harder thing would be to get out of your house, go down to the bookies and place the bet. So the easier thing is just to sit home and not bet. And yet I guarantee if you ask any person that has struggled with gambling addiction, it's the harder thing to stay home and not place the bet. So I can't really say it's harder in the physical sense of more actual work, but it's just harder because it's harder for us.
Yeah, not doing what you got to do to get heroin or injecting heroin isn't
that's
the easier thing. Yeah, it's easier to not do that.
Right. But it's definitely seemed like the harder thing when that's what it was.
And I don't know, harder, easier in those, fables or whatever you call them. It's, to me, I look at the old recovery saying, and I didn't get this for the longest time. I don't think, probably till I had 10 years or so, it was the idea that first thought wrong. To me, so many times still, it's, still true. It's like my gut reaction or first reaction to most situations is not the best.
Right.
It's usually impulsive. It's usually self-serving.
It's
usually based in whatever reaction to whatever feeling I'm having in that moment. It's like I'm angry, I want to hit. Mad, I want to yell. It's that kind of stuff. And that, why you might get that instant gratification from that behavior, it usually isn't the best solution to the problem in general. I also had a sponsor sort of explain to me that as addicts, like, we have this tendency to look at, solutions in extremes. It's like if everything's all or nothing or good or bad, or it's either all this or all that. And most of the time, the solution is somewhere in the middle.
Right.
And that a good thing to do is kind of sit for a minute and feel out the extremes. Like, all right, well, this is how I want to react to this situation. What's the complete and polar opposite of that, and sort of sit with it for a minute, use a sponsor, use some friends, talk about some other solutions, and find some solution that's somewhere in the middle. Because so many times the goal is to like, I'm trying to get something done or to teach my kids a lesson or to, get a task completed. And I lose sight of that when I make decisions based on my feelings.
Yeah. If you hear me share my story, my first thought is generally, fuck it. Right?
Yeah, right.
That's where I go every time. Fuck it. To bring up the first session part of this, episode, I got defensive when I got caught vaping and it was pointed out to me. And my thoughts were like, who the fuck told on me? And why couldn't that person have some integrity and come talk to me themselves? And why'd they have to feel like they need to tell my supervisor? And like, none of that shit really mattered in the long run. I was doing it, right? Do I agree with the method they handled it in? Not entirely. It's not who I want to be, but maybe they didn't know me or feel comfortable talking to me about it and they wanted to address it. So I don't fucking know. But yeah, my first thought is, usually my first 4 or 5 thoughts are pretty awful.
Right. And that's the benefit of staying connected to recovery, connected to people in recovery, is that I have people that have sort of some shared values and goals. I mean, for me personally, that tends to be the people I like to have around me in my life, are people that I, respect their opinions and respect the way that they live and the person that they are. And so that I can sort of talk through some of this crazy stuff. And unfortunately, I have the tendency of, obviously I like to talk a lot, and I have the tendency to, when I get into something, I will talk out my crazy thinking with people sometimes, which is kind of entertaining because I'll talk right out and admit fully out like whatever the first crazy thought
right
so many times. But it's fun to say it out loud because then it really, to myself, those things in my head they don't sound irrational.
Right.
They sound like good ideas. They sound like the solution to the problem. And then you say it out loud and you're just like, oh, that really, wow, that's the way I want to handle that. Like if I were looking at someone else who handled a situation like that. And my wife used to bring that up to me all the time with the kids. She's like, if we were in public and you saw another person talk to their kids that way, or to, handle their situation with their children that way, what would you think? And it's caused me to kind of step back and look at my behavior sometimes like that, like to step out of my own personal feelings to make decisions on how to handle stuff.
I tend to explain that for myself as part of a step 1 thing. And I'm sure some, step studier would tell me I'm way off on this, but I look at the part of step 1 that says my life is unmanageable, right? And I always, for a long time, I considered that to just mean, unmanageability. I'm crazy. It's chaotic. And I look at it now as actually literally unmanageable, as in I am not a good manager of it. If you put me in charge of it as the CEO of my life, I'm fucking terrible at it by myself.
Yeah.
And so I need a board of directors, right? Behind the scenes, I need these people I talk to in order to make the company run right, the company of myself, right? I'm crazy. I don't manage it well. And no matter how long I stay here, how many steps I work, my information sucks. I need to run it by other people and get their input.
Right. And so the fellowship that we go to, you may have heard me say, like, one of my favorite sayings out of the basic text, it's in the second tradition. It says, we are mismanagers and not one of us is consistently capable of making good decisions.
Right.
And I don't quote a lot of literature like that, but that line for me, because I'm an egomaniac and I think that I'm smart and I can figure everything out and I got it all to myself. And then to hear that, it's like, no, I am a mismanager. I'll get it right occasionally, but in general, maybe I'll be generous to myself. 7 out of 10 times I'm going to get it wrong. Like 7 out of 10 times my first impulsive decision is wrong,
Absolutely. I don't know. You got anything else to add about work and recovery? You had some other topics.
Yeah. The only other thing I thought with work was, I find that to be the place where I struggle the most with my character defects. I want to be included in the water cooler conversations about this person and that person and what they're doing and what they're not doing. And as I've worked my way up and gotten into a supervisory position, it becomes challenging. You can put yourself into really bad situations. Over the years, I've put myself in really bad situations trying to play both sides of I'm on the side of my boss and your supervisors, or I'm on the side of the employees, because, a lot of when you're employing 20 some people, everybody's got opinions. Everybody thinks you should be doing something different or this different or that different. And I've just found it difficult personally to maintain my integrity when it comes to staying out of gossip, staying out of the sort of rumor mill, water cooler conversations.
Right. Well, one of the things I ran into trouble with when I worked in the construction field was it seemed like everybody did drugs or drank, right? And so frequently it was a great thing when you got off early for a holiday, everybody went to the bar. There were some jobs where you were working on a certain building that was located across the street from a bar, and that was the daily lunch routine. And it was very difficult, not completely wanting to expose myself as someone in recovery at all times, but also B, just to deal with the stigma of, it's almost like the reverse stigma of I don't drink and I don't want to, and what the hell's wrong with you as a man in construction that doesn't want to have a beer with me, right? But along with that, so that's one particular instance, but I definitely agree that work or job related functions seem to be the most difficult place to either remember to apply spiritual principles or just to apply them when we do remember them. And why? Like, what is it behind that makes them so difficult, I guess, is my question. It seems to be, I guess family life's kind of a hard place to remember it all the time, too. It seems to be a little easier there because I actually give a fuck about my kids, for sure. I love them and I don't want to harm them. But what is it about work that makes it such an easy place to forget to practice these principles we believe in?
I think for me, the biggest thing is most of those people I will not see outside of that, 8 hours that I'm at the office. I don't see those people in my personal life. And so I tend to depersonalize them and depersonalize myself. And so therefore it's just a bunch of people at a place, and none of these actions really have any impact outside of that couple of hours there. And I don't know that that's the right way to look at that. I need to sort of personalize them and look at them as human beings and look at them as, people. That's treat them as people.
So I was thinking maybe the harder reason to practice it in a work environment is because we spend so much time around these people. Like generally with my, recovery friends, I get to spend an hour at a meeting, or maybe I get to spend a couple hours before or after the meeting eating dinner. But these work people is like 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. I probably spend as much time with them as I do my family, sometimes more, right? Unless you count sleeping time, which I don't. Maybe it's because of that close interaction and such frequency that it becomes harder to deal with their character defects, in which case mine get turned on to react to them.
Yeah, and see, I'm the opposite. Like, I'm the feelings don't motivate what we do. You know what I mean? Like, your feelings do not matter at all. We have a job to get done. This is how we do it. This is what needs to get done. Right. You can like it or not like it. I don't really care. This is what needs to get done. And, that approach allows me to sort of it allows me to minimize. I don't want to say not care, because obviously I do care about some of these people. I've known them for 20 years, so I do care about them a little bit. But it's very easy to separate out the personality side of things. Sometimes I have to do things that you're not going to like because I'm the supervisor. I got to tell you things you don't want to like. I got to give you jobs you're not going to like. And for me to manage that well, it's like the way I manage uncomfortable feelings for myself is just to squash them down, intellectualize them away, and act like they don't exist. So if I'm doing that with myself, I'm going to do that with you too.
Right.
I'm going to make it so that your feelings don't really matter. What you say, you get reduced to a machine in my head versus an actual person with actual feelings, that there are consequences to the things that I say about you to your coworkers, and
right.
In my personal relationships, I tend to focus a lot on those things. And in work, I don't.
Do you think also maybe the whole money, property, and prestige piece could come into that? Like at work, we can be diverted from our primary purpose of being good, kind, loving, compassionate human beings because that's really not our focus there. Our focus there is to earn a paycheck. Our focus there is to get a job done, to maybe advance our career. We want the prestige of advancement, so we got to perform well, so we got to make money for the company, whatever it is. Like, do you think because the focus there is different, it can divert us from what we believe our primary role in life and recovery is?
Yeah, so I don't believe my primary purpose in my life is to carry the message to the addict who still suffers. Like what I would consider my primary purpose, I guess, is more, I guess, spiritual living and the spiritual side of that. So if you're tying it into that part, I don't know. That's where so I've heard it said, and I don't know, I've wrestled with this in my head for a long time, that spiritual principles are never in conflict. And I don't know if that's always true at like a work setting, because, and I don't know that it is or it isn't. I'm not making a claim either way. I'm saying sometimes there are hard decisions, again, just like letting that girl go, or letting, pulling someone up for a mistake that they made, or, pulling someone up about something they don't like. Like, obviously, it's really difficult to do that in a way that doesn't hurt their feelings. It doesn't put them down, and trying to practice these principles when I have to do those things, when I have to have conversations with people about difficult subjects, is how I try to apply that. Right. I try to just be respectful. I try to be honest. I try to, when I have to pull someone up on something, I try to sit down with them, separate out my feelings, look them in the face and say, this is the issue that we're having. This is what's come up. Let's deal with it this way. Again, I don't always do that. There are times I get mad about things and yell about things or say something to someone else, because like at our work, it's one of the specific struggles is there are people that have worked there a long time. They're really good at certain aspects of their jobs, but they sort of have what I'm going to call like baby feelings. They think that they should be the most important person there and that everything should cater around them. And there are so many other pieces in the system, so many other little things at play that they don't understand, but yet they'll complain and, this person isn't doing that well enough and you're not doing this well enough and I need these things and you're not giving them to me. And they don't even understand why it is the way it is.
Right.
And so trying to just keep them in a positive way, doing their job, getting done what we need to do, addressing their concerns. There's a lot of pieces there that are hard to sort of, I don't know, I want to say bogged down. That's a bad way to say that, but get tied up into how do you practice spiritual principles in all these different disagreeable areas. Like they don't agree. They conflict with each other, Right. There's conflict there because, sure, it'd be great to go in and give every employee a $5 raise tomorrow and they all might be happy for a month or 2 months. And then they're going to want more money. And then, this isn't going to be good enough. Okay. So we fix that. Is that going to really fix the problem? It's going to make them happy. It's going to bring them peace. It's going to maybe make their life easier. But then if the company closes and we all lose our job, then nobody's, right. That's a detriment to everyone, So yeah, we can't just give away all the money, right. Because then there's none to keep a company running. So there are some conflicting things there.
Yeah. One other concept that occurred to me that might make it hard to practice spiritual principles at work, and I'll run this by you to see what you think. So when I got to recovery, I had always felt isolated and apart from, right? I never, even going back as far as like schooling, I just felt different than everybody else and like something was wrong with me and I didn't fit in, right? So when I got to recovery and could buy in and I did these certain behaviors that thank God were spiritual principles and good behaviors for me, right, to help keep me in recovery, I felt a part of in doing that. So that it led me in a positive direction, right? When I go to work, I find that that's generally not how most of society is living, right? They're not all hanging around the water cooler talking about how they can practice trust and faith today, right?
That's for sure.
Right. So I want to be a part of still. And in that work environment, when I try to go for that social acceptability piece, right? That being a part of the environment there and the crew, I tend to participate in what they're doing, right? And not that I'm some weak-minded person that can't think for himself and has to join the crowd, but I do want to be a part of things, right? I want to be a part of the work environment. I want to be a part of the crew and the fun they're having over there at the water cooler or wherever they have it. So do you think that ties into sometimes I diminish my own spiritual principle actions at work to try to fit in?
Oh yeah, because you're in a forced environment. You know what I mean? Some of these people you have to be around, and just to be honest, if you get 20 people in a room, I mean, probably 2, if not more of them, are just going to be assholes.
Right.
You know what I mean? They're just, and not even complete assholes, but they just might be dishonest people. They might, we might have a guy at your work that, tells a lot of stories that, are bullshit.
Right.
You know what I mean? And, you can't really trust that person all that much. And, you have a lot of personalities that are different that you're sort of maybe wouldn't hang around in your regular life. Right? They aren't really people that you would choose to associate with, that you're sort of forced to associate with. And with all those different personalities, now, I mean, I go to meetings. I like everyone. I'm nice enough to everyone, but I don't hang out. I'm not forced to spend hours of time with all those people all the time. I get to pick and choose the ones I want to hang out with and go out to eat with and do social activities with or have at my house. Right. And I tend to pick the ones I like. Yeah. So I don't typically talk bad about my friends because I like them. Right. Like you said earlier.
Even the tax collectors don't talk bad about their friends, Billy. Jeez.
Right. So the people at work that I like get along with, I don't talk about them.
That's
but the other side of it, and it's true for me too, like we all have assets and liabilities, strengths and limitations, character defects. Every person has them. I have them at my job. I have things I'm really good at. I have things I'm not so good at. It just becomes hard when people want to talk about the things that you're not good at. When people want to criticize me or talk to each other about it behind my back. Like, I don't want to hear that. My feelings get hurt and I get defensive. And so I want to do that back. And, it's like little ticky-tack stuff like that.
It's definitely hard when people paint a picture of me and it's not the full picture and it's only based on that one piece that I really don't want to be emphasized.
Right.
So yeah, I can understand that.
And then it's the same with them. They have those same things too. And, I have to really push myself to be like, hey, maybe this person is a little bit of a, diva at work, but they're really good at their job and they do exceptionally well in these areas. And so overall, they're an asset to the company. They're a value to be here. And if I can work with their strengths and sort of diminish their limitations or liabilities, that's the job of management or leadership. There's a really good book out actually called Tribal Leadership, which is sort of about some of these concepts. It's more about how you cultivate an attitude of a tribe. Like, hey, we're all, we're a team, we're a tribe. We're all working together. And you use these concepts of like similar goals. We all have the same goals. We all have the same focuses. We all have the same, drives to do these things. And cultivating those attitudes so that people stay focused on what they're supposed to be focused on at work, not on what so-and-so's doing with whoever's wife and what's going on behind the scenes. And did you hear this guy got drunk and texted the girl at work the other night, that kind of stuff. Like if we can keep focused on the important things of our tribe, hopefully we can negotiate around some of that BS that's going on.
Right. Yeah. I had read an article before. I was trying to be a better parent. So I read a book on parenting. I couldn't tell you what it was called, who wrote it, or any of that good stuff. I'd love to, give them a shout out. But it definitely talked about the importance in psychology of creating a feeling of, a team And it talked about, coming up with a sort of a mantra for your family, like, hey, we're Browns and we do the right thing or something, and how that actually works for children. Like they buy into it. They repeat that kind of thing in their head, and they feel we're all in this together. We're Browns and we don't do this certain thing, or we do this other certain thing, and how powerful that can be. You had mentioned something else that brought up something I read. Oh, it was the exercise about when you're struggling with a resentment or just with somebody you really don't like, to remember that even the worst person you've met has friends, right? Nobody's alone in the world. And those friends aren't hanging around them because of those qualities you see that you don't like. They're seeing some other qualities in this hated person that are pretty positive, right? So everybody's got some of these positive aspects. And to remember that at all times, that no matter how mad I am about this person's one behavior, there's probably a whole big picture behind it that other people are seeing. And maybe if I look, I can see that too.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. You got anything else for this week?
No, I think that's about all the things I could talk about at work at the moment.
Definitely not all I could talk about, but I think I'm done talking for the morning. All right. We'll see you again on the next episode. That wraps up this episode. Please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast on your preferred platform. If you have ideas for topics you'd like us to talk about or just want to add an opinion, contact us through Anchor, email us at recoverysortof@gmail.com, or find us on Twitter @recoverysortof.